As I said, good day, everyone, because I'm not quite sure what time it is where you are. But Shelley and I today, we are going to share with you our experiences in building an assessment structure and staff capacity within a community college's Division of Student Affairs and Enrollment Management. We're going to begin with a brief introduction. We'll share some learning outcomes, and then we'll spend the next approximately 50 minutes or so on our presentation. We hope that what we've built will be beneficial to you as you shape assessment at your institution. We are going to take questions, but we're asking that we do that at the end. So if you will, please place your question in the chat. And at the end, we will get to your questions if there are any. If we do not, we will share our email with you at the end, and you can feel free to get in touch with us at a later date. All righty. So who am I? My name is Angela Campbell, and I am from Harrisburg Area Community College. We call it HAC, Central Pennsylvania's Community College, and I've been at the college for 19 years. I began in advising and counseling. I served as a chair of counseling for about 6 years. I'm currently serving as the executive director of assessment, planning, and strategy. This is a position that's brand new to the college and is new to the Division of Student Affairs because I am positioned within Student Affairs. I began in May 2020, so that's some context for you. Also, for other contexts, even though I can say that my position has changed and has gone through several iterations, and I've only been here since May 2020, but I've had 3 vice presidents. So that's some context for you. All right. 3 vice presidents of student affairs, 2 interim, and thankfully, we have a permanent vice president of student affairs and enrollment management, and she has been here less than 2 years. So when I started the position, it basically meant get to work and figure it out. And so now I'm going to pass it to my assistant director, Shelley, and she's going to share a little bit more about herself.
Hi, I'm Shelley Blanchett. I work as an assistant director under Angela, and I have also been at the college for 19 years. I started at one of our newest campus, I should say, and I was a second full-time employee hired there before we were actually a campus and had a building to help build out that campus. So I have done all things student affairs as we were building this campus, and but my main title over the majority of the years was as a counselor. Like Angela, I'm a licensed personal counselor, and it's been quite a shift for us to move into this work. But our experiences at the college, as diverse as they are, have really helped us be successful.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Shelley. Why don't we go on to the next slide, and we're going to go into the learning outcomes. Please write in the chat where you're from, what college you come from. We want to say hello. Get some names and information from you. If you send your email, we'll contact you as well. All right, so what are we going to accomplish in this hour? You're going to be able to outline tasks associated with building structure and staff capacity for assessment, specifically within student affairs. 2, you should be able to explain how to teach outcome development in the co-curricula with an emphasis on learning outcomes in year 2. 3, you're going to be able to name a hidden, quote unquote, component required for staff to effectively conduct assessment. And then 4, recognize one strategy to keep equity work infused in your work and at the forefront. All right, I saw a counselor here, California. I want you to know I lived in California at one point, and it was wonderful. Had all of my children there. 3 years, Vallejo. But I'm back on the East Coast, and it was snowing yesterday. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Tell you a little bit of background. I want you to know about our institution because it makes a difference, right? HAC is the first and is the largest community college in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We have a very large presence with 5 campuses spread out over central Pennsylvania. Each of our campuses is approximately 40 minutes to 1 hour from one another. So we're pretty spread out and takes us a while to drive from campus to campus. We serve 11 counties. We have 85 school districts that feed into our community college. During academic year 2019-2020, this is again some context, we were going through a major college reorganization. So again, 5 campuses, a large virtual portion of our college, and we were changing our structure during that academic year from decentralized, meaning we had vice presidents and their staff at each of the campuses, to a centralized model, which means we would have vice presidents over areas. So vice presidents of student affairs over all 5 campuses. Really big difference. So many people were moving on to other opportunities, if you get my drift, because their position was simply no longer available at the college with this reorganization. Again, academic year 2019-2020. And the positions that were left, you had many of the staff that were interviewing for them. So if you had deans over several campuses, now you had fewer deans that were interviewing for these types of positions, et cetera, throughout the entire college. And so while this was going on, we were forced to move employment to a remote setting. So there was definitely a feeling of some chaos, at least within some of the employees. So that's a little bit of background. We do have an extensive workforce development that's not captured on any of our slides, but I wanted to give you an update about our background and some context of where we were positioned when I began this position. Okay, let's move into assessment and the foundational year. Take a look at this, because this is who we are, and this is what we do. This is assessment, planning, and strategy. I did share with you that we've gone through several iterations. When I first started in May 2020, I was going to be alone, actually, with an AOS, an administrative office specialist. And then I was going to be over Title IX, and then that quickly changed, and then I was given the responsibility of building our first care center. And I did that for about 1.5 years. So I was going to build 2 new positions at the college. It was very interesting. At this point where we are, and I think we've settled here for a little while at least, is we are at the point where I have 2 assistant directors, one who is with me today. I'm very thankful for her. And what we are responsible for are these circles: assessment, planning, career and transfer, outcomes, and strategy. So assessment, planning, strategy, and career and transfer outcomes. For today's presentation, we are going to focus on assessment. I think that you can see by this paradigm here that our plates are full, and they're full every single day. For some of you, you may not have circles like this. You may not have assistant directors, but you may have the title of assessment leader and other positions or other duties as required. And that means you could probably do many, many other things. So here we are. I want to tell you, even though we're going to focus on assessment, I'll tell you what my charge was when I first started. It was to build a culture of assessment within the Division of Student Affairs and Enrollment Management. So among other things, I was expected and am expected to assist the student affairs executive leadership and their teams. So I'm positioned and report to the vice president, which is a great position to be in, because as an assessment leader, we often are doing our work through relationships, not because we have authority over someone. You know, I used to have a faculty member who would ask others, do you have the authority to fire me? And if you don't, then he wouldn't listen to you. Thankfully, we have good relationships at the college, both Shelley and myself. So we needed to do that, and we needed to design and implement assessment. We needed to develop data literacy skills to enhance strategies for continuous process improvement. So that really was a part of the charge. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So these are my guiding questions. And this is what people hear from me all of the time. And my guiding questions when I started the position was, okay, where are we? You know, what's being done? How are we positioned? Where are we? Where do we need to be? And then what are the steps we need to take to get there? You know, Shelley probably would say, if I had money for every time I've heard Angela say that, and now Shelley, she says it all the time too, to the people that report to her. So I asked that of myself. I asked that of everyone within the division, all of the unit leaders. Where are we? Where do you need to be? And what are the steps you need to take to get there? I think that that's really important because that's like it sets the GPS about where you want to go. Let's go to the next slide. So this is a roadmap. And I think hopefully that this will be helpful to you. My previous questions, like I said, it's like the GPS to get you where you need to where you need to be. And you have to have an end in mind. And sometimes you have to figure it out. Like, well, what is the end? I have no idea. We did not have an assessment in student affairs formally. So here are the steps that we've taken to go through, and we'll go through these in more detail, but hopefully it will help you. I think that these are the key steps. I didn't put a timeline on these. In other words, how long I did research and consultation. That's always. How long did it take to build a structure? Well, you know, that's an iterative process. And the reason why I didn't put timelines on that is because I think that anyone who is in this room has different constraints and allowances that will dictate how fast or how slow you may have to go to build assessment across the division or at your institution. So instead, we just decided to provide these basic steps as a roadmap for you. All right, so here are the basic steps: research and consultation. What do I mean by that? External and internal consultations. I was looking at websites, reading books, articles, looking at websites, maybe some of yours, online webinars, attending those, NAPSA, SOL, Student Affairs Assessment Leaders, conversations, both inside and outside of my organization with other assessment leaders. I had to figure out where I was going. Creating structure. I needed to create structure within the division because we didn't have one for assessment. Like, so what was that going to look like? That means structure for people. You know, how are we going to position assessment so that it flows from the unit level to our department leads, our AVPs, and from our AVPs to our vice president. So we needed something that was a people structure. And then we also needed an assessment software management tool. So where were people going to place their assessment plans? So I had to create structure there, and I had to figure all of that out as well. Roles within divisions. We'll get into a little bit more details later. Building the foundation. You know, how to communicate, when to communicate, with whom to communicate, not just within the division, because believe me, you do have to communicate outside of your division. So how to communicate with the assessment leaders who are in academic affairs or across the institution. Building a foundation. How about workshops? Because we have to teach something. You know, what should we begin to teach? What would be the curriculum? When would I have time to do that? And how am I going to communicate that with the AVPs and the VPs, et cetera? Seeking baselines, determine unit baselines. So this was interesting because you say assessment to some people and they get a little frightened. So we needed to take the scary out of assessment. And so we built templates that were conversational guides. And because the basic thing is look, everyone in student affairs, you're doing something, you're measuring something. Let's just find out where you are, right? So we developed template guided conversations where I could meet with each unit director and eventually the SAC committee member, that's Student Affairs Assessment Committee member, that was part of the structure that I eventually built. And we started to develop some baseline measures. 5, assessment, adjustment, and accountability. We definitely wanted to infuse equity. We needed to have our units to begin some foundational plans. It's like, look, this is what I used to tell them. Perfection is the enemy of start. We're not asking you to be perfect. We're just asking you to start. Perfection can be the enemy of start, and we needed to start. 6, build capacity and structure. So we needed more structures because we needed to be able to build the capacity of the staff. And sometimes that means doing so without you being present. So having like Google Sites or coaching, that was something that we put in place that was instrumental to really building the capacity of our people. And Shelley's going to give you some great insight about that and show you some of the things that we've done. And then 7, begin again. Why? Because research and consultation continues, and conversations that we have to have, that because it doesn't stop at assessment. It means we have to eventually move towards program reviews. And what are we going to do about that? So, excuse me. So let's begin to take a dive into some of the more specifics. Next slide. It all started with research and consultation. So consultation within our institution with experts in assessment. I did experts from academic affairs outside our institution. I looked at LinkedIn, etc. This is horrible. I have to cough. Give me a moment. Hope I don't have a coughing fit. I've been talking all day. All right. It's important to understand the different models to structure our assessment and how it best fits our needs. So I had to talk to people outside of the college and inside the college. Don't be afraid to use LinkedIn. I used it all the time. I got a lot of what I needed from Saul. It is absolutely amazing. So what's Saul? Saul is Student Affairs Assessment Leaders. I think Shelley eventually is going to put that in the chat for you. But it's a mass online open course. It's a MOOC, and it's free. And I think they're actually getting ready to start pretty soon. It's phenomenal. I started it before I actually got into the position because it was a good foundation for me. And as a result, the assistant directors, they got into the MOOC as well. And I know Shelley has a lot of people who are in the SAC committee members. They've gotten into taking the MOOC. So this SAL class has been phenomenal for us to build our foundation. And I would highly recommend it. We had some favorite books. Okay, I'm getting my voice back a little bit. Favorite books. This is the title of one. Coordinating Student Affairs Divisional Assessment. It was very practical. It was a joint publication between ACPA and NAPSA. And it's a book that both Shelley and I read together, and it was very insightful to helping us to shape what we've done. So what are we doing? We are building the plane and flying the plane at the same time. It's not easy, but it can be done. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And most people in higher education are very willing to share what they've done that's been successful. So don't be afraid to reach out to people and ask for help. So we'll place it, again, like I said, some of these resources in the chat for you. Next slide, please. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Can you hear me okay, guys? All right, wonderful. All right, so as I shared, creating structure included how to position assessment planning and strategy department in the division. You know, how to structure people so the work was able to be done without being a burden. You know, during COVID, probably for all of you, whether you were at a university or at a college, I know for us, we became lean. We became a lean, mean machine, you know, so there were fewer of us. And so people were trying to figure out new positions, new roles. Remember, that was a context for us, as well as learning how to interact and run processes remotely. So we really didn't want it to be a burden, but something that they incorporated. So some of this included clearly identifying roles, you know, from the VP on. We would have, I had a whole workshop on who does what, you know, the vice president who's setting the vision. Now, keep in mind, I've had 3 vice presidents. So a lot of it was, as I said, you better figure it out, girl. So some of you may have vice presidents who are really on board. I tell you, I'm very thankful that I have vice presidents and a president who is very supportive and pushing the college towards assessment. So, you know, every single layer from VP through the directors, through the SAC committee members and the unit staff, what are our roles? So all of us that did that, and I shared that with everyone. We conducted guided conversations. This was extraordinarily helpful for us with each unit and SAC committee members. So we set and had appointments with each one of them each semester with some specific questions to pull out of them what they were doing, you know, to show that they really are doing something already, you know, and to make them feel good about assessment. We needed to develop a common language. And you know what I found? That's a little difficult. When I was looking, even for objectives, just looking like, well, what's the common language for outcomes? Reading different books, going to different websites, I saw different language. So eventually we just had to land on something and go with it. You know, I'm happy with where we landed. And again, I got some of this specifically from the book that Shelley and I were reviewing and recommending. Creating unit leaders, SAC members, workshop trainings, which meant the creation of the curriculum. All right, so I talked about templates a little bit, and I think Shelley may go into more detail there, but how about building Nuventive? That was extraordinarily important, you know, for us. What do I mean by building Nuventive? Well, we did not have a software management system for assessment in student affairs. They had it in academic affairs. And you know what I found is that I had an opportunity to go and speak to someone, the assessment leaders in academic affairs, and they were further along than I was because we didn't have anything at the time formally. And I was able to make analogies, right? Okay, so they did it this way, so we can do it this way. You know, so I did a lot of that to try to figure out where we should be regarding our Nuventive Improve and where we should build our assessment plans. That was extremely important. And it's been very helpful. But to be honest, even though I worked with a consultant, I didn't see a lot of examples. I wanted to see specific examples from student affairs, and I wasn't finding what I wanted or what I felt like I needed. And it felt like, it actually became, you need to figure it out and see what you actually need. So we're going to make sure that you have an opportunity to get a sneak peek. But before you do, I do want to tell you about the curriculum, like the templates, what kinds of workshops we did. We looked at things like, you know, what is assessment? What is an assessment cycle? Why is it important? these are like foundational trainings that we provided for the staff, which included the leadership, knowledge of relevant assessment terminologies, a structure of assessment in the Division of Student Affairs, etc. So let's go ahead and give you a sneak peek of our Nuventive Improve, and hopefully this is helpful to you. Sneak peek. All right. So if you have not had an assessment software management system, I highly recommend it because it will allow you to house everything right there. So if you take a look along the top part of the burgundy bar, you can see what we regularly reviewed. We wanted to find out like the number of outcomes that each unit had. We wanted to lean into student learning outcomes specifically because we didn't have a lot of student learning outcomes at all in the beginning, and Shelley will talk about that. So we wanted to find out more. This is like our second iteration of this. But what you see here are all of our units in student affairs. And it provides a big, broad overview that our VP, if she would choose, can come in and take a very quick look and see an overall view of what's happening in student affairs regarding assessment. Like, where are we, right? Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So this one is all student affairs. This one is an example of a unit level, right? Or a department level. So here we have safety and security, and you can see their specific types of outcomes. Most of theirs were operational outcomes. And, a lot of our staff were used to like the operational outcomes, like how long did it take before you answered a phone call? How many emails, how many appointments, those types of things for operationals, like efficiencies. And so you can see like the methodology type, whether it was mapped to a unit goal, number of mappings, etc. So you could take a quick look there, and we wanted to see the results and what the conclusions were. Along the side, we have included our institutional strategic plan so that they could reference that, as well as our divisional operational plan. So they can reference that as well. All right, next slide before I get ready to turn it to Shelley. This is an example of what we put in for mapping. We have our student affair goals. Each of our units have specific goals, and we want to make sure that they are able to map those. So I am going to stop because I think that I've been talking for a while, and I want to make sure that Shelley has a great amount of time to share with you as well. Thank you.
All right, I'll take it from here. Thanks, Angela. So we're going to start talking about building capacity, and we had a few different components that we consider essentials here. We first realized that we were giving individuals, our assessment leaders, lots of information. They were getting emails, agendas, retreat plans, and it really wasn't organized. So if we asked them to recall something, they had to go to a prior email and find it. So we really needed a repository of some type. And we decided, instead of a shared drive, to do this via a Google site so that we could have a one-stop reference toolbox. And it really helped organize the information and provide it on an on-demand ability for the leaders. We also developed a scheduled curriculum where we decided what modules we were going to have and the topics within those modules and when they were going to be covered over the next several years. As we developed it, we were resourceful to find videos, blogs, journals, all the stuff that Angela shared to help us deliver this without having to reinvent the wheel. Using these external resources not only saved us time and effort, it provided us with an additional level of expertise and authority to what we were sharing for our teams. We were intentional about scaffolding. We wanted to start with a really basic foundation of each of the concepts we are introducing, and then we layered on application of those concepts and added complexity to them. We also developed themes starting in year 2. These themes allowed us to build community around a similar topic and have a sustained emphasis as we wrapped our minds around where we were trying to go and move forward. In year 2, our theme was learning outcomes, and we are now currently in year 3, and our theme is equity. We also began to offer coaching outside of our larger trainings and retreats to address the unique needs of each of our units and the assessment leaders. And we offered this to make sure that we could meet them where they were at. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we move on. And lastly, we found ourselves needing to address resistance and fear that people were having, as well as overall threat that they felt regarding assessment. As assessment leaders built their competence and increased their confidence, we were equipping them with lots of resources, and we needed to be clear that the purpose of assessment was not related to personnel performance evaluation. And you can see how this fear might come to play for individuals who are solely responsible for carrying out programs, services, or different functions when they're assessing the work that they do, and it's only them who are doing that work. We also encountered along the way what EAB refers to as data avoiders. I'm going to put something in the chat for you. They have a great about 16-minute video where they explain different tactics individuals take to avoid data and how you can work to keep the work moving forward. So let me just grab that and put this in the chat for you. All right. So I'm going to give you a sneak peek at our Google site. It is password protected and only available to people inside our institution. And again, it gives individuals an on-demand. They can use it whenever they need it. So on the home page, we have our divisions unit purpose, as well as our 4 commitments. And at the bottom, each unit and department has its own page where we are transparent in what that unit's purpose and goals are and what their 5-year plan is for assessment. We have a page for our assessment leaders, and this provides information on who's involved with assessment within our division and the specific role that they play, as well as a link to all of the trainings and that we've had over time, listing the topics, the agendas, handouts, and such. In the middle of the page, we have what we really want to drive home that they can find real quick and easy. And then we take a deeper dive into a toolbox with tools that they'll need along the way. And we finish it up with professional development and the quizzes and things that we do to assess them. Our showcase provides our annual reports, all of the guided conversations that we've had with them related to assessment. And then we have our showcase where each training we do, the first 10 minutes, we provide an opportunity to highlight a unit to talk about what their key findings were, their takeaways, and what's next on the agenda for them. Lastly, we have a page for Nuventive where we have 3 to 5 minute videos to walk them through every task that they need to accomplish within our software. Our division has about 130 members in it at all of our locations, and our Google site within the past year has 450 unique users. So it is being used around the college to help support assessment for the institution. Whoops. There we go. Building capacity also meant leaning into student learning outcomes. As Angela shared, during year 1, we just wanted something. We wanted them to write outcomes. We wanted them in Nuventive. We wanted them to kind of move through the steps. But at the end of that first year, we realized that they weren't really leaning into student learning. And only 2 of our units, or 15%, had student learning outcomes. So year 2, this became our theme. And we wrapped ourselves around really working on this, and we were able to go up to 77%. And this year, we hope to get to 100% of the units having student learning outcomes. So we have 13 units within our division. But how did we get there? And you can ask this question of everything that we're presenting today, each component, but I'll pause here and talk about it for a little bit. I will second what Angela said about leadership. Leadership has to be supportive and on board, and it is at all levels. We have tremendous support. Our first year and a half, we provided 19 hours of training to our assessment leaders and retreats to our whole division. So everyone is getting a taste of assessment, no matter what their role was. Coaching was also critical. Everything we do is by relationship, and no one reports to us in regards to their assessment work. So we need to cultivate the relationships and really nurture them and meet people where they're at and provide them the resources that they need to keep moving forward. And lastly, reporting out is essential. Being transparent about where we expect to be and the time frame we expect to get there, being transparent about where we currently are and how we're going to get to where we need to be. And this transparency has to happen at all levels. We set clear expectations. We showcased our work and shared it. We provided summary reports of where we were as a team moving to progress towards this assessment of culture for our division. And we provided administrators with progress reports of their assessment leaders for their units. We introduced student learning outcomes throughout our whole division. So we talked to them a little bit about what they were. We provided them with an example like we see here with student services, and we used the chat function in Zoom to invite them to engage with identifying the different components. So we have them format their outcomes in an ABCD method, if you're familiar with that, and then identify the duration or the timing of it. And quite simply, we had them in the chat identify who the audience was. And then as we moved along, we color coded it for them so that they could engage with the material. And so we had two examples like this that they worked through, and then we put them into breakout rooms by their unit. And we had them work through a worksheet that had pre-written outcomes, and they had to identify these parts. We also had them have conversations. We equipped them with their goal and their purpose of their unit, so they had it handy, and we had them have conversations with their whole team about what are they expecting students to learn as they come out of using services, interacting with programs, and really working with those units. And so they practiced that and they named those things within the unit. Following this division-wide training, we pulled the assessment leaders together, and we had them write their learning outcomes. And then we put the leaders into breakout rooms, and we allowed them to have time for peer feedback and peer review. So we kind of phased it in and provided multiple opportunities to get on board with the learning outcomes. We talked about coaching being important. We knew where we were headed in year one, and I just had this gut feeling. I could go into Nuventive, but the dashboards that Angela showed you weren't built yet. We had to start with completely fresh with those. So we didn't have an overarching idea of where we were. I would have to go in and kind of tally things and look at things. So I took a step back. In the gray bar, you're going to see what we were trying to accomplish. We needed to make sure that the purpose and goals were accurate for what the units were doing. And this was really important because of the turbulation Angela was talking about with the reorganization and the realignments and tweaks that we continued to make. We were leaning into learning outcomes the second year. We wanted things in a certain format. We wanted them to have labels. We wanted them to be able to identify, is this something operational? Is this programmatic? Or is this a learning outcome? We needed them to map things to their goals. We also provided them an opportunity to map towards CAS. And we wanted them to have their results in when they finished up their cycle. So in February, I had a talk with Angela, and I'm like, I just am not sure everyone's on board with us, but I couldn't figure it out. So I pulled back and I made a sheet and kind of got a feeling, and that's what you see in front of you. And I said, you know, we need to kind of switch gears here and take a different approach. What do you think about doing some coaching? some one-on-one work. Recognize that people were at all different levels coming into this work, and we had started to build the foundation, but not everyone was staying on board with us. Some of our units also had unique needs. Several of them were brand new. Others had been at the college for a long time. Prior to the reorganization, they were just structured a little bit differently. So what we really wanted to do was to get everyone in the same place and to be able to provide them with some individualized feedback. So we started coaching. We began to understand the hesitations and fears that people were having and maybe some of the holdups that were not allowing them to move forward. And in 4 months, pay attention to the shifting colors. This is what happened. By allowing that individual coaching and kind of on demand, call me if you need me, let me help you move forward. So here's where we ended up. And it was really interesting because obviously we had our own outcomes for ourselves as a department, and for all of them, we put 100%. It's kind of Angela and our personalities to kind of say, we're going to do 100%, we're going to get there. But what we learned is not everything is within our control. We noted, we were in the middle of pandemic. We were on campus, off campus, kind of moving back and forth, and we were still kind of tweaking how we were being organized. And this meant that we were still hiring key players, and some of the units were missing leadership, and some of the new units were brand new and being added as we were doing this work. So I like analogies. I added this. I don't know if Angela even saw it yet today, but we have a recipe here. That's kind of what we're building. We're like, what needs to go into this? But there was a missing ingredient or a component that was like, aha, something's missing here. And it was data literacy. You cannot build assessment without data literacy. It's the hidden component and essential to the work that we do. So again, we go back to the Google site. It really, really worked for assessment. So we needed to pull everything together and make it easy for the learners in a one-stop shop to have access to what they need. So we built out a data literacy site. We needed our staff to form an understanding, a comprehensive understanding, in order to be able to shift to this culture of assessment. They needed more than just assessment. They needed the data literacy. So from writing their methodology to analyzing the results, we had a heavy lift to get there. We were teaching them about performance indicators, metrics, how to disaggregate data, how to do data visualization, and how to even find the data that we had and make sure that they had access to it and permissions. So we needed them to have this so that they could be equipped to develop their plans and to carry them out and to make sure that they were communicating the right meaning and drawing conclusions about their data. So data literacy is our hidden component. So the homepage here, I'm not on the homepage, I'm on the basic page, but the homepage talks about how we use data and explains to them the importance of it. We use it to forecast trends. We use it to inform decisions and execute our plans. And we allocate resources based upon data, fiscal resources, time, and personnel. It also talks about our commitments. We're committed to continuous improvement in this area in terms of our own competence and professional development. We are committed to continuously questioning what's going on here, to making sure that equity is at the forefront of what we do, and that the data tells the story of all of our students, and that we are both accountable and transparent to our stakeholders in regards to what is going on. Our basic page is a repository of key videos and a dictionary to help people understand the terms that we have been using. Our assessing data page helps people who are new and or transitioning to understand what data we have access to, what you can find there, why you might go to that data source, and tips on how to navigate them, kind of like little cheat sheets. For example, when we pulled our SAC committee together, not everyone knew of the extensive reports that you could pull from our phone system. And it might be important to pull a report, for instance, of where all of the telephone calls are being transferred to internally, because that's an opportunity for some cross-training. If calls are being transferred rather than answered at their first destination, if they can be. So we had a showcase in your reports here, data visualization. Some of our performance metrics are shared. And most importantly on the showcase is a lot of tools on helping them to know how to share their data out and appropriate data visualizations. And then lastly, and maybe most importantly, in my opinion, is the Excel Bootcamp, 1 to 2 minute videos where they can go to learn how to do something in Excel. You can't underestimate the importance of being able to use Excel to be efficient in the work that we're doing. So if we continue to use the analogy of a recipe, equity is not an ingredient. Equity is infused. Equity is in every ingredient and has to be there throughout. It's one of our 4 commitments in our division, along with access, success, and continuous improvement. So we're thinking about it each and every day. Our current operation plan for our division, 18 out of the 42 objectives are specifically equity focused. So here's some examples of how we have infused that equity into the work that we do. Angela talked to you about the templates. These are 2 questions from the templates. The top one relates to what data they already know and track, and the bottom relates to where they need to be. What do they need to know to keep on moving forward? And in both instances, we wanted to know, what are you tracking? How are you disaggregating it and looking at it to tell the story of all students? And how have you explored this data using an equity and inclusion lens, all of our students? And then the second one is really, if we can get you access to this, if we can write new reports, if we can find you a way to have this data that you believe is essential, how are you going to consider disaggregating it? How are you going to use an equity lens to answer some questions that you might have? So these were really, really fruitful conversations for us to have. We also knew that our staff needed to be able to use dashboards. We have lots and lots of dashboards and access to data. However, if you don't know how to find it and go in and use it, we're not going to be successful moving forward. So we had a little bit of fun and infused some, competition. We used Winston-Salem State University's escape room, and I'll put that in the chat for you if I have it here. Oh, I missed one. I'm sorry. So I'm going to put the worksheet that we used for student learning outcomes, and I'm going to put the escape room in there for you. So this escape room, you had to answer 5 questions using the dashboards, filter everything right. There were 5 sets of questions, I should say. So we put them into some breakout rooms and again, added some competition and had some fun with it. And then we upped the game by creating a similar thing to our adding a similar thing to the exercise where we used our own data sources and asked questions that were relevant to the work that we are doing, questions that relate to our strategic and our operational plan. So you can see 2 of them here. So given the question, what is the male Hispanic headcount for fall of 2020? Can someone go and find that? And can they get the right answer? So we did that, and we used a Google form. We were constantly doing our own assessment work to understand if the learners were getting what we were trying to teach. And we had a pretty high threshold for that. One of our directors actually asked, is there going to be a quiz on this when we started a meeting one day? Because there was a fire drill in the middle of one of our trainings and things were a little bit crazy going on. So, but yes, so this is one of the types of exercise that we did. We also made sure that we equipped our staff with tools in training and on our Google site about equity-minded considerations when communicating data. So on the left-hand side, there's a great article, and I'll put that in the chat. And on the right-hand side, we have the Urban Institute's Do No Harm Guide. We showed them videos, we walked through data sets and provided some examples. We just searched the internet for bad examples of inequitable data visualization and asked them, we gave them another quiz, look at this graphic. How would you improve it if this is what you wanted to communicate out? How would you lay it out to make sure that we were doing justice there? So let me go ahead and put those 2 articles or the article and the guide in the chat for you. All right, closing it up. So as we wrap things up, accountability is important, and we wouldn't have been able to accomplish everything we did with our mighty little department if we didn't have accountability by writing our own outcomes for ourselves. Here are a few that helped us move the needle. The first one is about our directors contributing to building a culture of evidence. We wanted them to be having conversations with their full staff about assessment frequently. So we told them this at the beginning of the year. And at the end of the year, in one of our guided conversations, we asked them to specifically name instances. Where were you? What did you talk about? Was the whole staff there? And 75% of our units were able to do that. The second one listed is about mastery of the ABCD format. Are they getting it? Can they apply it? And then the last one is related to developing a 5-year schedule of how they intend to cycle through their unit goals with assessment so that they're prepared for program review as it is coming up. We plan to do program review in year 5. So, oops, I am stuck. Froze for a second there. Okay, so what's next for us? We are going to work on incorporating external standards, including our role for student affairs in the self-study of our regional accreditation agency, which is Middle States here in Pennsylvania. And we're going to take a deep dive into the CAS standards for the functional areas. In year 5, we're in year 3 right now, we are going to begin to conduct program reviews. Although this year we are going to introduce program review conceptually and make sure that they understand the importance of starting to form their own evidence inventories. So that is what we have for you today. We can take a look back at the chat. If anyone wants to raise their hand and ask some questions, can absolutely do that too with the rest of the time that we have.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time and your attention. If anyone has any questions, feel free to take your video off or put it on or whatever so we can see you, and feel free to just talk to us a little bit.